All right, men, welcome. This is week 1 of release. We are going to be talking about forgiveness. Forgiveness towards yourself, releasing pain and hurts and trauma, forgiveness towards other people, and just the overall releasing and not holding on of the things that are weighing you down. So we're going to start this off. I wanted to give a good definition of what it means to release. And from the dictionary here is allow and able to escape from confinement, to set free, and also to allow someone to move, act, and flow freely. So the goal after these 4 weeks would be able to have more freedom to flow freely. Now the reality is that these things that we hold on to, they keep us stuck. They keep us confined. And they keep us in this state of not being able to function at full capacity. And they are really weighing us down. And so it would benefit us greatly to begin to let go and to release some of these things. So, started off with this quote. To heal your wounds, you need to stop touching it. Now, I need to touch on this a little bit because there is people out there who make a lot of money, and they benefit greatly with you staying sick. That is, you staying addicted, staying mentally ill, staying in anxiety, staying in depression. They benefit greatly from it. And so the main thing that I see in this is the codependent relationship, and that is the professional needs you to stay sick in order for them to feel validated, for them to have an occupation, and for them to get paid. And so they have no real benefit in you getting well per se, because then the money leaves and they're no longer needed. So we need to keep that in mind as we explore mental health in different situations, that the companies benefit greatly on the drugs that they offer, and there is no benefit for you to leave them on their side. And so understanding this is that, there is a modality out there that you keep getting in touch with your pain, and you keep reliving your pain. In fact, they tell you to invite triggers. Like if you know that something's going to make you sad, they tell you to go and experience that. And I find this to be very detrimental in a couple of reasons. Now, the first one is we don't really have the biblical example of constantly rehearsing and nursing our pain. And that is going to the place where we constantly relive it over and over again. Now, that just seems very detrimental to healing and releasing and letting go of the past and moving forward. That is first of all. The second thing is the emotional pain that it causes repeatedly. And it keeps us stuck in this victim mindset of a past trauma, a past pain that happened to us, and it keeps us to identify with that scenario and with that event. And what we're supposed to do is to release that, feel the emotions of it, recognize it, and step forward and move on and progress forward in life. So I find it to be very detrimental, and I find meditation does this a lot. And this is one of the detriments of meditation. Now, the Bible tells us to meditate upon the Word, meditate on the precepts, meditate on God. And it always has a real subject or a thought in mind as far as to chew on and to meditate. Now, there is a different form of meditation that goal is to become empty and become nothing, and to have your mind completely clear and begin to recognize the thoughts that come in. Well, this is where pain can be reintroduced to your life over and over again by these thoughts that come in during these moments of silence. And we think that God's showing us an area where we need to be healed, but the fact is that we are dredging up past memories, and we're feeling and reacting to the pain all over again. And so I find that to be highly detrimental. So moving on, release. We go through things. we go through pain. We're all human and we're all subject to frailty. And we all have different situations that have happened to us. And we need to really accept that and understand that there's going to be things that we're going to have to release. There is going to be old pain, old memories, old feelings, and all of that different stuff that we choose to set down, that we choose to walk away from these things and to begin on the path of healing. Now, I think when we relive and we rehearse and we repeat the pain over and over again, of course, we're giving it power and we're causing it to progress and to live on. And it continually is a part of our life. So we have to make the decision on whether we're going to let this pain go or we're going to hold on to it. And that's a choice that comes to us. It's our responsibility. Are we going to let go of the pain or are we going to hold on to it? Now, the reality is that all pain and all trauma and situations that come into our life, we go through a process. And what this means is that we don't instantly heal from these things. Now, I'm not saying that God in His miraculous power and His sovereignty and all this different stuff couldn't magically deliver you. I'm just saying that it most likely is not the case, right? Most likely go through different situations and different pains, and we go through the process. I have never seen somebody who lost a loved one jump up the next day and and everything is well, right? And if they do, it's a form of denial, and they're not really facing the pain of the situation. That just doesn't happen. So, as far as the pain and the trauma is concerned, we have to give ourselves grace through the process, because there is a process, and we can't judge ourselves because we're at the start of the process, the middle of the process, or the end of the process. It doesn't matter, because we're all in that process in some way or another throughout our lives. There is going to become pain, and that is you are going to get sick. There's going to be things that are happening to you that are beyond your control. There is going to be death of loved ones. There's no escaping any of these things that I'm talking about, and that we are going to go through them. And so understanding that first, that we will have these negative experiences, and understanding that it is a process. That is, we don't beat ourselves up because we're in step 1 of the process or step 2 of the process. You understand? So the first stage in trauma is always the kind of denial stage. And that is this really happening to me? We say things like, I can't believe this is happening, right? This is, of course, the stage of denial. That is where we begin to bury our heads in the sand and say, I can't believe that this happened to me. This really didn't happen. I'm not going to face this. I'm in denial. And this is really the period of time where we don't look at the truth. We don't experience the facts of what is really going on, and we stay in denial. That's basically the first step. Now, this can happen, in a relationship. If you think that the relationship's going south and there might be adultery involved in a relationship or unfaithfulness, these are the feelings that you're going to feel if you had to face this situation. You're going to be like, I kind of sense, I'm getting information that this is taking place to me. It's happening to me. And you begin to like, no, this is not happening. No, I can't. I can't believe that. I can't believe that. And so you go through a period of not really looking at reality. Now the reality is that other people can look at it and see it, right? They can see that the relationship's going south and there's infidelity involved and this, that, and the other thing, and they can see it, but we don't have the ability to see it because we're in denial. Now, this can happen in different painful situations. We can deny that some event happened to us in the past, and we could bury it, and we could stuff it, and we could sedate, and we could do all those things, and not really face the reality of what had happened to you. That's another form of being in this stage of denial. It could be in the stage of, losing a job or different things, though those situations, the reality seems to hit you pretty quick. But some of these first thoughts of denial, they seem to progress for a longer period of time. So that leads us to stage 2, is pulling our head out of the sand and really understanding this did happen to me. And it begins to stir in you some emotions, right? Like I remember when I got the news that my father overdosed on heroin. I was in shock. I experienced, a lot of anxiety for quite a bit of hours. It really didn't set into the next day. Now, there's some situations, like I said, we go through this process a lot quicker. But then there are those processes where we could be stuck in stage 1 in denial for years. That is, we're not really facing the truth of the situation that is taking place, right? And we're still holding on to it. Now, this happens, when a loved one commits suicide. This happens when a loved one overdoses. We still hold on to them, and we think letting go is letting go of their memory, or they're not worth it, they're not valuable, right? And we could be in this situation 10, 15 years down the road and still be at this stage of denial and refusing to let go and face reality of the way life is currently right now. So stage 2, this happened to me. I'm facing the truth. There's going to be a lot of different emotions involved in here. One of the emotions is really like anger, right? You're going to be really angry about the situation. You're going to begin to, feel like life's not fair, that there's a great injustice that has come upon you, right? And this anger is can consume us. Now, understanding this, in understanding grace and God's ability that works through our life, that it's okay to be angry. The Bible says to be angry and sin not. And it was thoroughly expected that you were going to face some injustices and you were going to have a reason to be angry. The reality is that your anger is probably extremely justifiable, especially if you've been victimized in some way, or if you had some of these painful, traumatic experiences happen. The anger that you feel is normal. It's okay. Now, I think that's the first thing that you really need to hear, because the reality is that we need to pull our heads out of the sand, and we need to recognize and say that we are angry. And identify the emotions and say, I am angry because I just had this happen, I had this happen, and all these different situations, and just really owning the anger. I am angry, I'm pissed off. Now, what begins to happen if we don't own the anger and we don't identify the emotions, we don't identify the cause, and we don't actually feel the pain, we try to do something different, and that's trying to avoid the reality of all those different situations. So, step 3 in this situation is, what did I do to deserve this? This is where we go into a funk. This is where we go into self-pity. This is where we can go into victimhood. And we say, what could I have done differently? It's all my fault. I've noticed 2 kinds of people in the world, and that's one who take responsibility for nothing, and those who take responsibility for everything. And both need help. And that is, the person that doesn't take responsibility for nothing needs to step up and take responsibility, and the person who takes responsibility for everything needs to release some of that and recognize that there's nothing they probably could have done any differently. And even if they could have, living with the shame and living with the guilt and living with all the regret is not going to help you for any sort of forward progress and growth and development. So, in this, I think we need to thoroughly understand, especially when it comes to childhood trauma and adverse childhood experiences, that we need to understand that we were victimized, and we need to pull our heads out of the sand, accept reality, accept that we have the right to be angry, but then come to the next conclusion that it really had nothing to do with us. The person was the problem. They had their own issues, right? And it really had nothing to do with you. You were in their story. You were in their frame. You were within their contact of their sickness, of their mindset, of their disease, of all these different things, right? And it's a reality that I had to face growing up with parents who were diagnosed schizophrenic, both of them. Living off we called it nut money. They got the nut money, but Social Security and just living off the system and not able to function as normal people. That being said, there was a lot of affliction of trauma, but I had to come to the conclusion that it really had nothing to do with me. It wasn't because I was evil. It wasn't because I was bad. It wasn't this, that, and the other thing. Is that they all had their own issues and their own trauma. And the reality was, when I look back, they were doing the best that they could with the talent, skills, and resources that they had. And that it really, the pain that happened really didn't have much to do with me. And I think we totally need to accept that. But during this stage 3 we're talking about here is that we go into this question of, why would God allow this to happen to me? We begin to assign blame to God, and in here, we're very angry, and we're very sad and depressed in a sense. And the reality is that when we go into assigning meaning and we begin to judge a situation, that is to begin to try to understand why, the reason why, we go into a dark place, extremely dark place. Let me try to break it down for you. Is that I experienced trauma from my mother, and I begin to analyze the question why. And why comes to assuming her motives. And that is, it comes down to she didn't love me, and that I wasn't lovable, and that I'm not okay, and my self-worth gets affected. And so whenever we go to judgment, and that is to begin to assume another person's motives, and begin to assign a label to those motives, we're bringing ourselves to pain. And that is, we begin to experience a lot more pain based upon our judgments. If we leave it to just what happened, to just the reality of what happened, and just the pain, without attaching significance and judgments and all these different things to people's motives, the pain is far less able to cope in a better fashion. When we start all these judgments to the situation, we get into very painful stuff that really hold on to our lives. So, step 4 is this. After I have come out of cluelessness and burying my head in the sand, I begin to find some sort of acceptance of what happened to me. And that leads, of course, to feeling these emotions and feeling these pain, right? And so this leads to, being sad and depressed. I need something to make me feel better. I feel like hurting myself. I need release. And this is where addiction comes in. This is where cutting comes in. This is where suicidal ideation and all these different things come into play. I've heard people who experience cutting that they find a great release from the behavior, and it causes them to release. And what it is that they feel that everything that happened to them and all the pain that they're feeling doesn't come out, right? And what do they become? They become, I'm a little teapot, short and spout, and it becomes to build up, and the pressure begins to build, and they find this behavior very releasing. And this is the same way addictions work. This is just the same way different things that play out in our life, play out in the realm of to comfort us. And that is that we're feeling pain, we're feeling sadness, and we go to something for comfort. Now that we've started a relationship with God and that we have faith in Him, this is supposed to transition to coming to Him. And that the Spirit of God is supposed to be our comforter, our healer, and to be all those things inside of our life. But when we're just managing, when we're just coping, and when we're outside of Christ, or we're choosing to do it our own way, we choose these different things to bring us comfort and basically to take away the pain. And so understanding this is that if we don't face the pain, we don't accept the pain, we are going to stuff the pain. And that is that we are going to sedate. We can sedate in so many ways. And this is where the delusion comes in. Because if we don't deal with our pain, then we sedate. We can sedate with positive things. And that is, we can sedate with religious activity. I remember when I was younger, religious activity was a high sedation for me. And that is, whenever the church doors were open, it was a church that had long services and sometimes even camp meetings. They were called revivals. And you were in church 24/7. I mean, you were in church all week. And all of these different things can become a sedation tool to not face reality. This is what our occupation can become. Our job, we become to sedate ourselves with all the work so we don't have to deal with the pain. What this looks like is keeping very busy, right? Keeping your schedule and your calendar full and going to all these different activities and just being a social butterfly and doing all these different things so we don't have to stop for a minute and be alone with our mind and our thoughts and begin to process the emptiness that we're feeling. And sitting with that pain and recognizing it, accepting it, and identifying it and saying, you know what, I'm feeling pain. And being able to sit with it and being okay with the reality of it is the process towards healing. You might need to scream. You might need to let out some rage. You might need to take an axe to a tree. You might need to do something, right? As a process to really let these things out. For me, it was probably a wailing and a moaning and a really crying to God and just releasing all of that pain. It can come in many different forms. But the reality is that once we accept it, once we begin to recognize it, stop stuffing it, then we can begin to deal with it. So stage 5 is this. The event happened to me. I didn't deserve it. I will not let this event destroy my life. I'm not going to accept the victimhood mindset, and I refuse to let the abuser have power over me. Now, this is the process of coming through a situation, okay? But here's the detriment. We come to step 1. And we say, you know what, I can't believe this has happened to me. I'm going to stay in denial. I'm going to bury my head in the sand. And I'm going to live there. And what begins to happen is you don't progress towards the process of healing. And that is, you don't go to step 2. You're just going to stay in step 1. And like I said, people can camp out at this step for their entire lives. They can live forever in denial and refusing to accept the reality of what happened to them and the pain of maybe a behavior or something they did to somebody else, and they stuff it, they compartmentalize and put it out of the way and refuse to face the reality. And then you can come to step 2, where you begin to understand, you begin to accept the reality of what happened to you. And then you begin to get angry at an injustice that has taken place because something happened that wasn't fair. And so you can come to this place and say, you know what, I'm going to stop right here. And I'm going to stay angry. And you could do this your entire life. You can die this way if you so choose. There's a lot of angry, bitter people that die in this state and staying right there. I've recognized the pain, the traumatic experience that happened to me or what I did to somebody else, right? And I'm going to get angry. Now, this anger can happen at somebody else, or this anger can be manifested to us. And when it's manifested to us, that's when we begin to self-harm and do those hurtful things, right? And we could stay there. We can camp out there. We can build our tent there and say, you know what, I'm going to be the angry person. I'm going to stay angry. If we pass step 2, we can go to step 3, where we begin to say, you know what did I do to deserve this? And begin to look at it. It's all my fault. And we can begin to assign blame to God and say, take on this victimhood mindset. And we can just stay there. And what happens? We begin to stay angry at God. And then, of course, connection with Him begins to dwindle away. We can stay angry at another person, and then, of course, the relationship falls and comes to nothing. So we can decide to stay in step 3, and that is blaming, assigning responsibility to different people. Step 4 is depressed and sad. You know what's the crazy thing about all this? Is that once you have gone through these different processes of pain, and you're at step 4 and you're feeling sad and depressed, and you're trying to sedate with addiction, you're trying to cover the pain. The reality is that you're only one step to freedom. But the reality is that we know that people die in that state also. You see, my father had something very traumatic happen to him when he was young. And by his teenage years, he was already fully experimenting with drugs and sedating due to the couple of traumatic experiences that began to happen to him. And then, of course, I'm sure if I were to identify his life, I would see that he went through these processes. And, of course, as we know that he ended up dying from a heroin overdose, and I can guarantee you that he was at step 4. And that is, he knew the pain, he identified it, there was this anger and there was this different stuff, and now he was in sedation and trying to stuff the pain and not feel the pain, not understanding that he was one step away from freedom. And that's the way we got to look at it. And here's what we got to do, is that when we see people in their pain, because the reality is when you begin to walk through your pain and you get to the other side and you begin to release it, you see others and you see exactly where they are in the step in this process. And you begin to bring a message of hope and encouragement and say, keep walking. You're only a couple steps away. You're only one step away. You're almost there to the end. And that, of course, is fully accepting the event that happened to you and beginning to understand this, that God works all things together for good, those that love Him and those that are called according to His purpose. And what this means is that all the mess, all the nastiness and everything that we go through, that mess becomes our message. And that test, as the preachers say, becomes our testimony. And the pain that we go through, it brings multiple things inside of our lives. The first thing that I see is really character transformation. And that is, we learn grit, we learn to endure, we learn to go through stuff and come through the other side. We learn God as the source of our comfort. We learn to rely upon the Holy Spirit to guide and direct us. Now, the reality is that we only need comfort when we're in pain. And we only need direction when we feel like we are lost. And so all of these things, God works together for good. And it brings in us a sense of humility, of going through painful situations, and coming out the other side. And ultimately what it does give us is a connection to God as our source. And that we can assign the meaning. The meaning is this, is that everything in life is meant to turn me towards God, not away from Him. And so we can allow these different situations to turn us away from God. Or we can decide, you know what, I'm going to turn towards Him. And it's really whether a situation gets better or a situation gets worse. And that is if we go through these situations and say, you know what, I'm not going to turn towards God. I'm going to turn towards things, substances, addictions, habits, all of these different things that can become detrimental and a distraction. You say, I'm going to turn towards those. That is the only difference. Now, those who go from glory to glory and change and become better and better and shine to the more perfect day are those who turn towards God. And those that turn away begin to sink under the weight of the pain. And so we have to decide, for all the things that we have experienced, are we going to walk through it? We're going to stop sedating. We're going to turn towards Him. And He's going to become our source of comfort. Or are we going to seek comfort in another source? The reality is that we're in need of comfort. We're in need of release from the pain. Now, ultimately decides what kind of release we're going to get by the decision that we make on this point. We're going to turn to Him. Is He going to be our comfort? Or are we going to find release inside of Him? The choice is ours. I'm looking forward to next week, brothers. Peace.